these are like the names. Instead of the numbers, you can use names, although this is not very commonly used because that is not very user friendly and it takes more time every time you'll need to dial in. Also, for URIs, you will have to have the end phones or endpoints which supports the URI dialing. Not all phones or the low series of IP phones does not have the keypad or the numbers or digits or sorry the letters to be dialed for the URIs. So it should be the devices which are capable of doing the URI calling, and also it is more time consuming, so very mm, rarely used, not very commonly used. The digit dialing is used very commonly. So here we will see how we can configure URI calling in CUCM. So what is URI? URI consists of user portion and host portion separated by at the rate. So like an email address, it's kind of that format. It is a fully qualified domain name like that. So John at the rate RTP dot intern, something like that. This is what a URI is. So using this, if we want to make call to a user instead of its extension, for example, 1001, that we can do. But why would we want to do this? That is very rare. So it's more user friendly to dial in the numbers. And also we need the IP phones or the phones which are capable of doing the URI dialing. Another phone, on the other hand, in this example is Alice at the rate RTP.internal. So these can communicate to each other using their URI formats and the URI dialing. So here we can see some different clusters and different locations we have. And a SIP trunk is made between these, and for making calls between the users in different locations or different clusters or sites, that can be done either via these the DN numbers that we already know, or via URI that can be done. So URI is an alias of the phone line directory number. For the phone line, for example, a directory number is this and its URI is this. This will be an alias of this phone line directory number. So we can just call this as an alias of this. That's it. So these are some terms. We have different user. This just represents different names, and URI is configured for different phones in different locations or different sites. Directory URI components. So it has a user portion, it has a host portion. So it has a numeric versus alphanumeric format, allowed characters. Case sensitive, is it? No. IP address versus FQDN. Now, IP address is obviously different. IP address is in the format 10111/24. FQDN, on the other hand, will be something like it's John at the rate cll.collab or anything. That will be its fully qualified domain name, and that will be its IP address. The two of the options to make communication between these or as an identifier of the devices, it is not case sensitive. And there are some allowed characters and some are not allowed characters, like at the rate, full stop, that can be allowed. Some characters are not allowed. So we see during the lab, numeric and alphanumeric format is supported. So in the URI, basically it is composed of two portions. One is the user portion, other is the host portion. So for example, in the John at the rate cll.collab, this is the host portion. The domain is the host portion, and this John will be the user portion. Application of directory URIs to directory numbers. Now, if you want to assign the directory URIs and numbers and associate these, we can do that. Up to 4 URIs can be assigned or applied to a configured DN. Then directory numbers with directory URIs, primary extension 1 URI from end user URI can be configured. Primary URI, if present, will be used for making calls every time. So that will be its identification of the URI. The primary URI number will be used if no end user based URI set one URI as primary. URIs configured for the DNs can be part of any partition, member of directory URI partitions. URI configured at local n groups and URI imported from LDAP can be done. So URI's configuration, either we can import it from the LDAP, so you can go ahead and configure it on the LDAP if you want to do user provisioning and authentication for large number of users. We can do it through an LDAP server, or we can configure it locally. Types of calls, different types of calls we know we can make to destination hosts. One DNS service is used for this purpose. DNS is required. Also, this is one of the prerequisite for URI dialing, that you must have a DNS server. The DNS records used are these, like A record, SRV records, which are used for DNS service to work. And the DNS service SRV name is this, SFO cluster.internal. This is the name of the DNS service. So two destination hosts, IP address and FQDN, let's say this name is available. We have a SIP trunk between different sites. We have SIP route pattern. We have SIP route pattern for this address as well as for this name or FQDN. When we are configuring their URIs, we have, let's say for the user, we have a user J Doe and J White using its FQDN and IP address. So these are the two formats we can use alphanumeric URIs. Numeric calling, for numeric URI calls, we can use, like, instead of names, or for in the user part, you can also use the DN numbering, numeric. Standard numeric calls are just the numbers that we already know. For the standard calls or standard numeric calls, we only use the numbers or the pattern for the numbers. It can be national, international, or internally. Any pattern can be used. Route patterns can be used in these formats with exclamation mark, which is the wildcard format, and so on. So this is just a representation of different types of callings that can be done. The different prerequisites are SIP trunk is configured, route group, route lists are configured to make calls outside or between the sites for multi-site deployments. SIP route pattern configuration, we can see the same IP address, FQDN is there, DNS service is available. For different users, for the domain routing, we need a domain configuration like this. For SIP route pattern IP address routing, we need the IP address as the domain. So the host part will be the IP address in that case, whereas the standard numeric calls means the same way. So in the previous example, what we saw that in the user portion, we can use either the names or the numbers. So it can be either alphanumeric or numeric. And also in the host portion, we can use either the names or the numbers. SIP route pattern considerations. So in SIP route patterns, when you configure SIP route patterns, destination IP address for SIP messages are used. Wildcard in SIP route pattern can be used. Partitions in CSS, block SIP route patterns, which is the same concept as the numeric calls. So in even in the case of URI, the same concept is used. We can use partitions in CSS. For calling privileges, we can block SIP route patterns using, let's say, time schedules or class of restrictions and so on. Destination IP address for SIP messages. Destination IP address is derived from SIP trunk configuration. Domain or IP address of called URI is only used to match SIP route pattern. IP address ranges can be in this format for domain name or can be in the IP format. Best or most specific match logic applies. URI call routing considerations. So there are some considerations when we do URI. So sources of URI calls should be there, blended addressing support, and preservation of host portion. So what happens in this? If you have, let's say, a host portion, for example, cisco.com, you can preserve that for all the users so that it makes it easier at the time of configuration. So you can just like fix this domain, and then once you are doing the configuration of all the users, you can use the same domain name and just put the user portion in that name. For example, I have 4 users. I want jdoe@cisco.com. I want janewhite@cisco.com. So without preserving all the host portion, I'll have to type in the entire for every user. By preserving this, I can just give the username. It will automatically add the host portion. Blended addressing support if you want to use both the DNs and the URIs. So blended addressing support is required. Sources of URIs can be either the manually done on the device itself, local, or through LDAP. Prevent CUCM or CUCM from replacing URI host portion. So how we can prevent the CUCM from preventing URI host portion to be replaced. So that we will see in the lab also. We have a DN, we have a directory number URI, we have a directory URI this, we have a DN number this. Now when a calling party, this is making a call to either this or this. So it can make a call either to the DN number or to the URI. Now calling party, John at the rate, this can be changed. Now, how it will be changed, it can be due to many reasons like DNS or trunking or any transform patterns configured. So if we want to prevent any transformation or replacing of the URI host portion, we can do that in the configuration for the URI in the CUCM itself. So for different sites, we can prevent CUCM from replacing the host portion of URI only that for the calling parties or for the call party.